Welcome to Caregiver Cast with Mary Elaine Petrucci. Are you overwhelmed raising a family, working full-time, caring for a parent or grandparent? It can be challenging when you're doing it alone. Caregiver Cast helps busy, burned-out professionals reduce their stress and overwhelm to create a better caregiving experience for themselves and their loved one. Caregiver Cast brings caregivers together with experts who provide information in a variety of areas. In each episode, you'll get tips on topics such as finance, legal, medical, self-care, community resources, mindset, and more. We're here to make your caregiving journey a more rewarding one. Acquire the confidence and skills to be a more capable caregiver by implementing the resources and strategies from these expert thought leaders. Get a community of support, resources, and strategies for your caregiving journey inside the Caregiver Lifeline community. Visit caregiverlifelinecommunity.com. And now here's your host, Mary Elaine Petrucci.
Hi, welcome to Caregiver Cast. I'm Mary Elaine Petrucci, your host. My guest speaker today is Dr. Mort Orman, and his title of his interview today is How to Become a Low-Stress Caregiver in a High-Stress Caregiver World, which is a very perfect topic for our audience today, Dr. Orman. Before I formally introduce Dr. Orman, I'm just going to give you some background information about him. Dr. Mort Orman is an internal medicine physician with 40 years of success as an emotions mastery and stress elimination expert. He has written 23 books on how to eliminate negative emotions and stress without using drugs, relaxation exercises, or other traditional management techniques. He is the creator of I Can't Believe I'm Not Angry Anymore, a 10-session quick anger mastery program that has proven to be extremely effective for helping people overcome long-standing anger issues. Dr. Orman has led more than 100 emotions mastery and stress elimination workshops for doctors, nurses, lawyers, business owners, entrepreneurs, other professionals, and even the FBI. So we really have exclusive information straight from Dr. Orman. He has also been the official sponsor of the National Stress Awareness Month in the U.S. every April since 1992. Welcome, Dr. Orman, to the Caregiver Cast. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Mary Elaine. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you've given us an incredible bio, so let's start with...
Can I live up to it? Is that the question?
No.
No, I'm only
Working
kidding.
with the FBI, I think you've already answered that question, Dr. Orman. Let's put that one to rest.
Yeah.
So how did you get interested in working with emotions and stress management?
Well, it was really self-preservation. You know, as a young physician, even before I became a physician in medical school and my medical training, you know, I had a lot of anger issues. I had a lot of emotional control problems. I had a lot of anxiety, tremendous fear of public speaking. You know, so I would have never done something like this or never volunteered to do something like this. It was just, I would have been a basket case. And I had a lot of relationship problems and, you know, just all kinds, plus all the normal stuff that most, you know, young physicians and professionals have. And when I opened my practice, I had even more stress. And then, so I was experiencing all this stress myself. And then my patients were coming to me, you know, and not only were they telling me about their health problems, but they would, you know, talk about what was going on in their lives and tell me about the problems they were having and marital difficulties and the business difficulties. And some of them would get addicted to drugs because they couldn't deal with their emotions. And, you know, I was seeing all this stuff on a daily basis. And I knew it was coming from me because, you know, if I didn't figure out how to, you know, get rid of my own stress, A, I wouldn't be of any help to my patients. And B, you know, I might end up with some adverse consequences in my life as well. So that kind of motivated me. And I had tried all the standard stuff, the standard management, anger management, stress management, relaxation, all that stuff. It really didn't make a big dent in the things I was struggling with. So I made a decision early after being in practice for a couple of years that most doctors don't do. Is I decided to do personal development work
Okay.
and make an investment of time and money to do that. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things I was, never taught in medical school about
Okay.
life, about human beings.
Hmm.
They send you out there to take care of human beings, but they don't teach you. They teach you about hearts and lungs and kidneys and things like that, but they don't teach you a whole lot about the human being that has those organs. And so doing personal development work, I really opened my horizons of understanding and got a lot of new insights, and some of them started to help me with my own stress problems. And then I started seeking out more and more of them. Eventually, put them all into like a system that I could use. And then systematically, I went through and one by one tackled each of those major problems
Mm.
and basically cured myself of them by using
Wow.
the approaches that I had learned in various, different personal development formats and with different mentors and gurus and people like that. But I put it all together and started using it, and then started teaching it after I saw that it worked for me. I started giving seminars and workshops and teaching other people some of the things I had learned.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's very impressive. So tell me, how long were you doing your personal development after you decided not to stay as a physician, or did you?
No, I still stayed as a physician, but I was an oddball physician. I was
Okay,
I was on the path to enlightenment as a physician.
well,
So
that's a good thing.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, it was, most of my colleagues were not into doing that kind of stuff. They were just doing traditional medicine. I was a traditional scientific based medical
Mhm.
practitioner, and maintained that through all my medical career. So I never left that, but I just added all these new insights that helped me professionally and personally, you know, um,
Mm.
to be a better doctor, to be a better human being, to have less stress, to have control over my emotions instead of my emotions controlling me.
Mhm.
These were all really valuable things that I learned how to do after I got out of my medical training.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so it didn't happen overnight. It took me a number of years, of exploring these ideas and opening up questions, beginning to, for example, I started questioning everything that I had been taught to believe about stress and started wondering if it was really true or not. And if
Mhm.
it wasn't, what was true? And that took a while to really work through a lot of those issues, and a lot of those principles that everybody was being taught and still are being taught
Mhm.
that I discovered 40 years ago are not really true. And that keeps people trapped in stress when they don't have to be, which is part of the title is, we live in a high stress world, but
Mhm.
most people don't realize that you don't have to have stress, even though today's world is very crazy and high paced and,
Mhm.
a lot of stressors and things. You, you don't have to be stressed by that stuff if you know what's going on. If you know the truth about stress and you're able to recognize the myths and misconceptions that are out there, and you can understand beyond them, what's really going on. So that's why I sort of make that provocative title, because normally people think
Mhm.
if you're living in a high stress world, there's no possibility of being low stress. Um, and that's what we've been taught. Actually,
Mhm.
we've been taught that life is just stressful. Forget about living stress free. That's a pie in the sky, Pollyannish,
Mhm.
wishful thinking kind of thing. It's not real. You can't do it. And people have been taught that, and so they don't really search out solutions other than the traditional stress management stuff, to go beyond that and to actually discover that they already have the ability within them, if they knew how to use it properly, to be in stressful situations and not be stressed by them.
I do like the title, and it's very appropriate. So, could you explain a little bit of some of the teachings that you had to kind of like relearn from what like society was telling us was what stress is and how to take care of it?
Yeah. So, for example, one of the first things I realized, this was like over 40 years ago, I realized that stress is is not a thing. It's not. There is no stress, in the sense that it's just not there is no, but what it is just a word. So we have this
Mm.
word in our vocabulary. This didn't used to exist until like the 1940s, when a guy named Hans Selye, who's the father of modern stress research, and he studied animals and stressed them and shocked them and did things and studied all the physiologic changes, or at least started that whole field of research. So anyhow, he came up with this term stress. Before him, nobody suffered from stress.
I see.
People went through World War One, and
Hmm.
nobody complained of being stressed. Now they had a lot of issues, they had a lot of difficulties, but we didn't have this word stress to refer to them. So it turns out that stress is just a word we use when we're having problems in our life that we'd rather not have, or that are troubling us or bothering us or stirring up our physiology and making us sick, causing us negative emotions, causing us relationship conflicts. That's when we say we're suffering from stress, we're not really suffering from stress. We're suffering from problems. And
Oh,
that was a big awakening for me, because everybody's being taught the opposite.
hmm.
Everybody's being taught you're suffering from stress. And
Mm,
if you believe that, then the next thing we've been taught is, so what you need to do is learn how to deal with stress.
right.
And I'm saying you can't deal with stress because it's just a concept. It's just a word. Now, there is the physiology in the body. That's true, and that's been
Mm,
studied scientifically. We know our bodies get stirred up when we're having problems in life.
right.
Okay,
Hmm.
but that's where it's coming from. It's coming from problems. It's not coming from this mythical entity called stress, which is like a unicorn. It doesn't really exist. Okay,
Mm, hmm.
so when the stress management industry encourages people to take all your problems in life and dump them in a basket, a virtual basket, and call that basket stress, and then you ask yourself, how can I deal with my stress? What you're mainly going to be able to do is deal with symptoms, and that's all you're going to be able to do. Now, you can do that by by turning to alcohol or drugs to deal with your symptoms. You
Mm,
can turn to healthier things like meditation and relaxation and Tai Chi and all kinds of, stuff.
hmm.
But still, you're mostly dealing with symptoms. Okay, you're not really getting at the causes of your specific problems, because your problems are all lumped together now, and you can't get at the causes of individual problems when you mush them all together.
Well, that would make sense that you,
Mhm.
if you put them all together, it's hard to untangle them, right? So,
It's fun. It's funny. Years ago, a cardiologist sent me a page when I was in practice, and I was doing some stress counseling as part of
mhm.
my practice. A cardiologist sent me a police officer, a Baltimore City Police office. I was in Baltimore at the time, um, which is where I was born and raised. And so he sent me this police officer who was in his 50s, had been on the force for 20 some years. He was also a runner,
Mm.
and he had a heart attack.
Oh,
And the cardiologist took care of him. He was off work for a little while, and it was a mild heart attack. He had healed, he had recovered, and the cardiologist encouraged him to go back to running, but he was afraid to go back to running. He was
okay.
he was terribly anxious about it,
Hmm.
because he thought it might precipitate another heart attack. So after trying to convince him that he was fine and getting nowhere, he sent him to me. So I remember the first day I saw this guy, he comes into my office. I knew he was coming. I didn't know much about him, but I knew he had been scheduled as a patient. So he sits down, never met him before, and he says, Doc, I really don't know why I'm here. My doctor thinks I have stress, but I don't have any stress.
If
And
you're a police officer, I would think that you would have tons
A,
of
a
stress.
police officer. B, you just had a heart attack.
That's right. And no stress. Okay.
C, you're anxious as hell about going back to running because you're fearful you're going to have another heart attack. And he says, I don't have any stress. So I knew he had to have some definition of stress that didn't include those three things.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I said to him, I said, Okay, what do you tell me what stress means to you? What's your definition of stress? And he said, well, that's easy. My definition of stress is when you're so, burnt out, you're so discombobulated that you can't function, you can't go to work.
Mm.
So since he had returned to work, okay, therefore I do not have any stress. Okay. So then I said to him, this is an hour-long visit. Okay. So this is the first 5 minutes, right? Then I said to him, okay, well, let's do this. Let's take this word stress and let's just put it aside for a second. Let me ask you another question. Are you having any problems in your life? His eyes rolled back in his head. He said, how much time do you have?
Of
And he
course.
literally spent the rest of the 45 minutes, okay,
Mm-hmm.
rattling off one set of problems after another, not just those three, but he had 20 more, that were going on in his life
Okay.
with
Okay.
his wife, with his kids, with the different things happening in the transitions going on in the police department. Just one problem after another problem after another problem. But in his mind, that he didn't have stress. And in a way, he was right. He didn't have stress, but he had problems. Okay. He just had
Okay.
this really, specific definition of stress, which isn't a good one. The best way to define stress is it means you're having problems. So instead of asking yourself, how do I deal with my stress? You should ask yourself, what are the problems I'm having? And how
Mm.
can I solve those problems? That's the ideal way to deal with stress. And to do that well, you have to get at the causes of each problem.
Mm.
So, for example, when I had all these problems as a young physician, like the fear of public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
I had to zero in on that issue. And I said, okay, now why am I having this tremendous fear of public speaking? Now,
Okay.
I thought public speaking was inherently anxiety producing, that it just was. I thought that people who can speak well in public have some gene that I don't have, that I don't have that ability within me. And I had all kinds of other thoughts about what it's all about, what the purpose of it is. And it turns out when I started examining my beliefs about public speaking, none of them were realistic. None of them were valid, but they were just things that I picked up over the years or thought I had picked up that I
Mm-hmm.
believed in. But when I really stopped to examine them, it's like they were garbage. But they were making me anxious. They were making me crazy about speaking in public.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of what I mean by getting at the root causes. I had been blaming public speaking as the cause.
Okay.
And it turned out that it wasn't public speaking so much as how I was approaching public speaking and kind of unconsciously, you know. So it was more within me than it was with public speaking. And then I had to figure out, well, how am I doing that? And I was able to identify the different thoughts that I had that were making me anxious. For example, I thought you had to give a perfect speech every time. So you had to memorize it and practice it, and you couldn't make a mistake. And so there's all this performance anxiety leading up to the event. If I had to speak, I would avoid it at all costs if I could. I would
Mm-hmm.
even feign illness to get out of a speaking thing. But if I was forced to do it, which I sometimes was, I felt like I had to be perfect and I had to get everybody's approval. And I had all these crazy ideas that was making it very anxiety producing.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that public speaking isn't about that. It isn't about being perfect. It's about having something of value that you want to share with people,
Mm-hmm.
and just having an opportunity to share it with them and hoping they'll get value out of it, and knowing not everybody's going to resonate with it.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully most people will, but there are going to be people in the audience that are going to fall asleep or walk out or, that not particularly appreciate what it is you're sharing, and that's okay. Before it was like, if that ever, the fear of that happening was like monumental.
Mm.
And then I realized it's really part and parcel of talking to an audience is you can have all kinds of different people. Some maybe didn't sleep well the night before, and they doze off, who knows what, but the reality is you're not going to please everybody, and that shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to deliver value and to give something to the audience, not so much get the approval of the audience. So once I started to realize that's how public speaking really is. And I started practicing speaking from that new context. What if I let go of my old beliefs and adopted some of these new principles that were more grounded in what public speaking is really about? And so I went out and did that, and I went, lo and behold, hey, it's not as bad as it had been before. And then the more I did it, the more comfortable I got. And then eventually I just lost all of that anxiety because I started seeing the whole endeavor differently and newly because I'd worked on myself to do that. So that's one example of getting at the root causes, because the root causes were within me. Same thing with my relationship problem. So I failed at all my relationships with women up till my mid 30s, and I felt like I was never going to get married. I was never going to have children. If I did get married, I was definitely going to get divorced because that was my pattern. That was my history.
Mm.
And it was also because I didn't have a lot of insight into why that was happening. Every time a relationship would end, I would do a post-mortem and I would identify all the problems with the woman that I had been involved with, so that I didn't pick a woman that had those characteristics next time. So I would make a diagnosis, but the diagnosis never included me in the picture. So naturally, even no matter how different the next woman was, the relationship ended up not working out in the long run. And it wasn't until I started to realize that, hey, I'm in every one of these relationships. Different women, different characteristics. Some of them very carefully selected so this wouldn't happen. And it still happened. So that's when I said, okay, I got to figure out what's going on with me in relationships. How am I, what do I think is the secret or the way you behave in relationships to have them work out, which I'd never asked myself before. Okay. I just operated from my assumptions, but I never said, well, what are my assumptions? And then I started looking inside and identifying them. And when I did, it was like, wow, these are not good. These are not success principles for a relationship. Matter of fact, it's a guarantee that your relationship's going to fail if you follow this formula. And so I said, boy, I've got to get some new relationship roadmaps. And I did. And then I started doing workshops around relationships and finding people who were good at relationships that I could study with. And I started learning some things. I started building some relationship skills. And I was able to finally turn that whole failure pattern around. So my wife and we just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
This year. And I owe it all to the fact that I discovered all these crazy ideas I had about relationships and patterns of behaving in relationships that were problematic. And I realized I had to stop doing those if I was going to have a good relationship. And so another example of what I mean by getting at root causes, they mostly the powerful ones that we have control over within us. And we're just not encouraged in our society or in our schooling even to do those deep dive looks inside, So, for example, if you're a caregiver, that can, I'm a physician. So being a physician is a stressful occupation, potentially stressful occupation. There are a lot of things that will stress a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be stressful. Same thing with being a caregiver. There's a lot of things about the situation of being a caregiver that are potentially very stressful. You've got elderly people you're caring for, their brains might not be functioning normally. They may be getting angry and volatile and having behavior issues, and other kinds of issues. And you've got other family involved, and that can be problematic. And then there's your life and your responsibilities and your caregiving responsibilities intersecting, and that's got to be sorted out, negotiated, and all that in a positive way. So you got all these potentially stressful life circumstances, but if they become problems for you in any major way, you have to figure out how you're contributing to the problems. What are your thought patterns and behavior patterns that are making those things worse or keeping you from just having those things happen and not stress, or I'm using the term stress, but I'm talking about make you angry or make you frustrated or, make you anxious or whatever the specific problems are.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing how to deal with those specific emotions when they come up, because there's going to be a lot of emotions that come up in the role of a caregiver, you know.
Oh, definitely. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I
That's
think
fine. That's
this is
fine.
a really important thing that you're bringing up. So yes, they have all these, we'll call them stressors, and they all intersect. So how does a caregiver, or how did you step aside? Were you using specific techniques to go and look inside about what you were contributing to the problem?
Well, I'm not so sure it's techniques, but there is, it's self-awareness. It's wanting. A lot of it is wanting to understand what's going on inside you. You know, we all get conditioned in life.
Mm-hmm.
From our childhood days and all through adulthood, everything and all the media sources we listen to, the movies we watch, the TV shows we watch, the books we read, the people we hang out with, the groups we participate in,
Mm-hmm.
all we're getting all kinds of things that are conditioning our bodies and our minds
Mm,
and our
yes.
brains to
Mhm.
function in certain automatic ways. Now that's true for every human being. And then the conditioning just sort of takes over, and things happen, and we get an automatic response. You know,
Mhm.
and different people get conditioned and programmed in different ways, but none of us are never not being conditioned. So you just have to understand and figure out, I'm sort of triggered to think this way or perceive this way in this situation, or, react this way in this situation. And that's part of my automatic way. My body is now designed to be automatic.
Mhm.
It's like a knee-jerk reflex. So you have to figure out your own patterns. Now, some of them are common to most of us, like, for example, wanting to be right.
Mhm.
We all go through life and we end up wanting to be right. It's like a big deal.
I
And
know. You can't be right
and
all
and
the
and to
time.
it, and it's like a double-edged sword. So you
Mm,
need to be right, to navigate life and know what to do and make decisions. On the other hand, if you have an excessive need to be right, or you need to be right all the time, or you
mhm.
can't admit that you might be wrong, then that can lead to problems.
Yes, they
Okay?
certainly can. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's also, like you had brought up earlier, just the fact that, like, a person with dementia may have behavioral problems and the caregiver thinks it's their problem, when in fact that's really the only way the person can communicate their specific discomfort in some way.
Yes. Yes. And a lot of times family, uh, when you're an adult child,
Hmm.
and your parents are up in age, and now you're in the caregiver role for them,
Hmm.
and you're trying to do your best to take care of them, and they're getting angry at you right and left for over things that they shouldn't really, in your mind, they shouldn't really be getting angry about. You're just trying to help,
Right.
and they're reacting to your effort to help with hostility. That's very difficult for most adult children, caregivers,
Mm,
to stomach. I mean, they feel like they're being rejected, or their efforts to provide care are being unappreciated, and it makes them angry. Now they get angry at the parent.
well, exactly. I think I can add to this in a slightly different way. A friend of mine had injured her back, and her younger sister came to help. And of course, that brought on some tension because each one of them would do different activities a different way.
Mhm.
And because it wasn't done the way the person that was injured thought it should be, um, it just created more friction. So I think what you're saying, in some respects, the adult child is not doing it maybe the way that the parent would do it.
Well, there could be all kinds of things the
You know,
parents
it
reacted
for
to. Yeah, yeah. I
right.
mean, that could be one. Yeah, that could be one. But it's just a matter of, when something comes up that's a issue, it's
Hmm.
not going the way you want it to go. You have a choice. You can blame the other person or the circumstances,
Right.
which is what we're kind of taught to do.
Mm-hmm.
Our whole society is all about blaming everything outside of us,
Mm-hmm.
for why problems are happening. Okay, or you can realize that that's not the wisest strategy, and it's better to not blame yourself, but to compassionately look within yourself
Mm-hmm.
and realize that we're all conditioned human beings. We all get conditioned to function automatically,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's just biology. It's like human biology. And that the more you can understand your conditioning and exactly how it works
Mm-hmm.
and how it produces your emotions. So all of our emotions are conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting angry, for example, there's certain ways you're automatically thinking and perceiving, or you can't get angry if you aren't looking at things that way and thinking about them that way. And there's certain automatic tendencies to respond when we get angry that will sometimes keep the anger going for much longer than it should. There's been some scientific research that says most negative emotions should go away within 90 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
just on their own. Okay, they get stimulated, they get triggered. We have this automatic response, automatic ways of looking and thinking, and then we get our emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
then, and then in the normal course of events, if you don't do anything to prolong the emotion, it'll dissipate in 90. The hormones, the and the physiologic reactions will dissipate in 90 seconds, and you'll go back to normal state. But that's not what we do. we keep the emotions going. By the way, again, by thinking about it, re-looking at the situation, doing all kinds of other things, blaming, all kinds of things we get into, but it's all part of our automaticity.
Right.
And you just have to be responsible for your automaticity, not in the sense of blame, not you're responsible in the sense of you're to blame, but realize it's your body. Your body has been conditioned to think and feel and behave in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it is, you have two responsibilities. One is, how are you going to condition your body going forward? You're going to keep doing the same conditioning, or are you going to introduce some new conditioning that might be better? Okay, and that's where we get into learning and personal development and attending workshops and seminars or hiring coaches or whatever we do,
Mm-hmm.
where we try to build some new conditioning and skills. Uh, so that's one choice. And then the other choice is, again, are you going to blame the external circumstances, the behavior of others, or are you going to look inside and see how your own body and brain
Mm-hmm.
have been conditioned to either partly cause that situation or keep it going when it shouldn't be going long. People who are angry for months and years and decades, that shouldn't be.
Right.
But we
Right.
do it. We do it, and people can't stop it because they don't understand where it's coming from. They don't see the mechanism. Same for other emotions. We don't really and we're not taught. We're not taught in elementary school. We're not taught in high school. I went through all the traditional schooling plus 7 years of medical training. Wasn't taught any of this stuff. None of it.
So why do you think that is? Because it would take a caregiver or any person for that matter to be very highly aware of what they're doing and how they're reacting for them to step back and to have a different perspective on the situation by
Yeah, well,
looking inside. So how can you what
it's hard to
advice
do it.
can you give?
It's hard to do it on your own. Even though it's your body and it's conditioned and you should know it. We don't really. A lot of it's unconscious.
Mhm.
So it's hard to, even if you decide you want to look inside and see what's going on or figure out what's going on, it's
Mhm.
hard. It usually requires the help of other people to help you. And then once you let people help you see what's going on, then you can kind of carry the ball after that. Then you know how you're conditioned, and you know from experience that, yeah, I tend to look at things this way, or I tend to react this way when such and such happens. But you usually need somebody to help point some of these things out to you. Now, some you can maybe recognize on your own, but there's deeper ones that sometimes you need help. Having people help you to do. So that's where the coaches for caregivers come in. That's where workshops or whatever, where people can help caregivers have an easier time dealing with the various stresses of being a caregiver. The whole goal of those things should be to stimulate caregivers to be able to do that kind of internal evaluation and internal work that will give them lots of rewards, going forward.
No,
So
I
yeah,
think that's really important because we are bombarded with so much information during the day. And so it goes through all of our
yeah,
unconscious filters that we
yep,
have.
yep,
And we tend to generalize, distort, or delete information depending on how it works with our values or our
yes.
beliefs. So if you're taking like, I don't know, something outstanding like 120,000 bits of information per second all day long, no one can really process any of
Yeah,
that.
well, our brains don't, I mean, there's all that information coming at us, but our brains don't let us, you know, uh, recognize it all. Our brains will just
Hmm.
dampen it down and simplify it, to make it palatable, something that we can handle. And
Hmm.
that can be a problem. I mean, that can be one of the things that causes us problems in life is we're not really seeing the full information. We're just seeing the filtered part that our brain can handle.
Hmm.
And there's more going on than what we normally are able to see.
I totally agree with that. So when a caregiver gets to that point where they're feeling really angry or overreacting in situations, should they then just reach out to like their physician and ask for a referral, or what do you
Well,
recommend?
I know if when I look back when I was in practice, if somebody had said that to me, yeah, I could refer them. I might refer them to a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Mhm.
But I don't know that, I don't know that that would have helped them that much. I mean, it depends on who you end up with as a therapist.
Right.
And there are a lot of, quite frankly, a lot of therapists that are not that skilled with therapy.
Mm.
Psychiatrists are more into prescribing medications, and they tend to treat more severe mental illnesses. But if you're just talking about run of the mill mental health issues like, I'm a doctor and I'm stressed, or I'm a caregiver, I'm stressed, or I'm a mom and I'm stressed,
Uh-huh.
or I'm a CEO and I'm stressed. I'm not sure that psychiatry and psychology is necessarily the way to go, but there's certainly people that are good at helping people deal with stress or specific kinds of stress. Like I do a lot of emotional stress or anger type stuff, and people who have anger issues. I'm certainly available to help them, and there are other anger experts out there. Now, again, there's a whole range of how effective they are and how helpful they are.
Hmm.
But I can take people and very quickly turn their anger problems around so that they before they work with me, they can be very, very angry, and maybe all their life they've been angry. And then
Hmm.
I work with them for 10 sessions or so, and they're completely different. They have a whole new insight on where their anger is coming from. They have all new abilities on how to deal with it, and it only takes like 10 sessions to do that. Now there, other people that have other skill sets that they can make available to folks, who have those kinds of issues. If you're having financial problems, there's lots of financial coaches and experts that are out
Hmm.
there. If you're, a manager, a business, you're in a corporation and you're having trouble managing your group that you're in charge of. I mean, there are mentors for managers, to help them with leadership skills and management skills and how you inspire a work team and build a team and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, there's lots of resources around but the thing is, you have to hone in on the specific problem you're having. You can't just say it's stress because
Okay.
that's nebulous, unicorn land. Okay, you have to know what your problem is. Is it a financial problem? Is it a management problem? Is it I'm a caregiver and I'm emotionally overreacting to the behavior of the person that I'm caring for,
Hmm.
or I'm overwhelmed. I've taken too many things on my plate. I don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done and have a life for myself, that's a specific problem, so you have to narrow the problems down so you can get at the root causes of each of those problems. Now, you may have one big problem, or like the police officer I mentioned had 20 or 30 problems. And many of the people that I worked with in my practice when I was doing stress counseling, they came in for one problem, but they really had, 5, 6, 7 things going on simultaneously that made them say, I have stress and I need help.
Okay.
And whenever they walked in my office and said they had stress, never met them before, don't know anything about them. The only thing I knew is their problem isn't stress. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not stress.
That makes sense to me. I mean, if you've worked on it yourself and found that it's not stress, then obviously you know how to approach that then.
It's funny, I wrote, many years ago, I wrote this handout that I used to give out to people. It's called How to Become an Expert on Stress in 10 Minutes or Less, guaranteed.
Okay. Wow. Can you pass that information on?
And I just did. Yeah. I mean, it's all you have to do is know that stress is just a word, and that what it means is people are having problems. And you're now an expert. You're now that's as expert as you can get on stress. Now, it doesn't mean you're an expert on all those problems that people are having. But as far as stress is concerned, I can make you an expert in 10 minutes.
Okay. I appreciate that, Dr. Orman.
And I actually had a certificate at the last page of the handout. Was a certificate, and it's filled out. It said, "You are now a bona fide stress expert, bona fide expert on stress." That's funny.
Got it. I love it. Okay. Can you give caregivers 3 takeaways from what we talked about today?
Yeah, first takeaway is anytime from now on, when you hear the word stress, whether someone's talking to you about stress that they're having, or you're thinking to yourself, my God, I'm stressed, okay? Or somebody in the media is said, talking about stress. Whenever you hear that word, just switch it to problems. And you'll have a much clearer idea of what's actually going on. Now, you may not know what the problems are until they're better identified, but at least you know that's what you're dealing with. People are having problems. And it's incumbent upon them and us to understand what those problems are. Two people meeting at a party, and they both go, "Oh, are you stressed?" "Yeah, I'm stressed." "You're stressed?" "Oh, yeah, I'm stressed." You have no idea what they're actually talking about, what's going on in their lives. They may have many completely different sets of problems, but they're having bothersome problems, as they use this word stress for. So that's number one. Number two, stress management. Remember, stress management is being touted as the be all end all. The best possible thing you can do is get really good at managing your stress. And to me, that really never made any sense, because again, if you really look at it honestly, you're mostly dealing with symptoms. And most of us know that if you have lots of problems in life and all you do is deal with the symptoms, you're going to keep having those problems, and you're going to have to keep doing whatever you're doing, punching a punching bag or running 5 miles or doing relaxation or whatever. You're going to have to keep doing it all the time, because you're never stopping the problems. They just, every day, they keep getting more weak or whatever, they keep regenerating. So it is to realize that stress management is not a winner's game.
Okay.
But if you want to win against stress, which I recommend, people go for winning, which means not having it.
I would appreciate that.
I remember when I was a very angry guy in my 20s and 30s, and as a young physician, I didn't want to manage my anger. I wanted to not be an angry guy.
Why not?
That's winning. That's winning, not being an angry guy. I didn't want to manage my stress. I didn't want to have stress, or I wanted to know how to get rid of it really fast without having to do all this mumbo jumbo, punching back stuff. Deep breath stuff. So the second thing is be very suspicious of stress management. Now, stress management is fine if all you want to do is manage your symptoms, and there's a role for that. Okay.
Right.
You might not have the time to dig into the problems and treat them at their roots, but that's ultimately where you want to go. And then the third thing is realize that you're going to probably need somebody to assist you. You're going to probably, and it doesn't mean you have to go out and get a therapist or get a coach, but you might need to tap people in your life who can help you see through the blind spots when you try to understand what's going on, within you that's contributing to these problems. It's very hard to do that on your own at first. So you're going to need help. It could be a minister. It could be a relative, it could be your doctor who might have some insight into some of this stuff. It could be, just somebody you meet on a bus, and you say, "Hey, I'm having this problem, and here's how I'm looking at it. Do you see it? Do you see anything I'm not seeing?"
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, you can walk up to a couple strangers and lay out a quick problem, and tell them how you're looking at it, and they'll probably have a different perspective, and they can maybe shed some light on some things that you weren't focusing on or paying attention to. That might help you. So I'm not saying go out and spend a lot of money. You certainly are welcome to do that if you want to, and hire people to assist you. Okay, I have people do that. They pay me all the time to help them get rid of their anger or their stress or whatever. So it's that service, and there are a lot of other people who do the same thing. They're anger coaches, they're stress coaches, there's public speaking coaches, there's CEO coaches,
Right.
and I'm sure there's caregiver coaches.
Okay.
And if there aren't, there should be some soon, because it's a needed service. Yeah. So just realize you can't do it on your own.
Okay.
I didn't do it on my own. I did all this personal development. I put myself in situations and places where other people were opening my eyes to things. And then once I got enough of that, and again, it was over a couple of years. Once I got enough of that, then I could carry the ball. Then I could, once I knew what the patterns were, then I said, okay, here's that pattern again. It's coming out. Here's this one's coming out again. I've seen this one before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no such thing as stress.
No. Never has been, never will
There
be.
will be. Okay.
Just a word, just a concept.
All right. Perfect. And only see somebody for stress management if you only want the symptoms.
Yeah, just realize it's symptoms, and there's more available than just dealing with symptoms.
Right. And to seek help.
And then to get that more, it's hard to do it. You have to really allow other people to assist you.
Right.
And seek out. You have to actually actively seek out people and invite them to help you see yourself more deeply and more accurately. Because we all, not only are all conditioned, but we all have multiple blind spots where we can't see things about ourselves that easily.
That's a very good point. Thank you. So look for help if we need to. Perfect advice. So I understand that you have a free offer for our audience.
Oh yeah. So I have another handout, not the one that'll make you an expert on stress.
Oh darn! I was hoping we would have that one.
But anybody's welcome to email me. I'll be happy to send that to you. Yeah, I have an offer. It's a small PDF, short PDF. You can get it. It's called The Best Anger Elimination Method You Can Find.
Oh, wow.
And it talks about how I cured myself of anger, and a little bit more information about anger, and the Not Angry Anymore program that I offer people, the 10-session coaching program. And it gives them my email address if they want to get in touch with me. And also when you sign up, when you download the PDF, you get on my email list. So I send out an email every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay.
I pick a topic related to stress or anger or emotions or something, and I break it into 3 parts, and I deliver, discuss the topic over the week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday installments. I've been doing that for 12 years.
Wow.
And a lot of people have been with me for a long time on that list, seem to enjoy those emails. So, and then you can email back to me. So when you get on my email list, if you have questions or you want that the other report I talked about, you could always email me and I can send that off to you.
All right. Dr. Orman, thank you so much for being a guest speaker today on Caregiver Cast. This has been very enlightening, and thank you very much for sharing your personal stories. 'Cause
Well,
I
I'm happy to share that knowledge that I've gained over the years. So not only do I use it for myself, but I like, making sure that people have access to it too.
thank you very much for doing that. I thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing from our audience about what they think about how they can change their perspective about how things are going in their life, and really making that concerted effort and attention to change it.
Yeah, because even though caregiving has challenges, it doesn't have to be stressful. The fact that most people end up getting stressed by it doesn't change that. Just because they're not doing the work they would need to do to eliminate the stress doesn't mean it's not possible for any individual who's in that role to find out how to eliminate most of the stress they might encounter in that role, and in any other area of their life as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's very possible for all of us to do. We already have the power within.
Right, we do.
We do. Yeah. And it's just a matter of knowing how to access it in the right way, and knowing, what strategies to use to make it happen.
Yes, I would agree with that. Thank you again.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Caregiver Cast today. Get a community of support, resources, and strategies for your caregiving journey inside the Caregiver Lifeline community. Visit caregiverlifelinecommunity.com. Get involved with the show. Send your email to mpetrusi2002@gmail.com. And we'll see you again next week for another episode of Caregiver Cast.